Ira is going to I'm not going to do him a disservice and try to tell you what he's going to talk about. I'm going to leave that totally up to him, but be prepared, hold your seats. He's going to be touching on workforce planning and development, and how the way that we're looking at things is not how we should be looking at them. We have to start thinking outside. There isn't a box. I sent that quote out about Deepak Chopra. Get rid of the box. There is no box. You have to come out of your box. Get rid of it. If you do have one, destroy it. Don't create another one if you're really looking to go to the next level. I'm going to bring Ira on now. Ira, knock their socks off.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Kelly for inviting me to participate in this. When he called me, he told me he was on the agenda, and just a few weeks ago, I was sitting in the audience listening to John McElligott, and I walked up to him after. I'm writing a book. It's called When the Shift Hits Your Plan. There's a flyer that went out, and there's a free preview of that if you want to download it. But I was sitting there, and I walked up after, and I handed the book to him because he basically stole all my material. But we basically follow the same thing. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be a part of this agenda. It's also humbling because a few weeks ago I did a TED Talk, and the topic of that was Make Change Work for You. And I talked about my lifespan and really, I've been dancing with change. That was one of the slides we talked about. And we're all dancing with change. Some of us are following the lead, some of us are taking the lead, some of us are pretty clumsy, and we're tripping over our feet. But the reality is we all are going to be dancing with change. So a couple examples. I don't see anybody here under the age of 15, but so almost everybody will remember this. Okay? To a 15-year-old, this is a 3D product, a 3D printed product of the Save icon. Yes. They've never seen this before. I spoke at a text conference just a few months ago, and I forgot that. And so I'm at a group, and they're mostly 25 year and younger, and said, do you by chance have a disk, a removable disk? And half of them said, what's that? Do you need a thumb drive? What they brought back was the 5.5 inch or 5.25 inch floppy drive that they found in a closet. And most of them didn't know why you would ever use that. Yet we've grown up during a time when we're talking about going from a floppy drive to a 3.5 inch drive to thumb drives to the cloud, and I'm still living here to talk about it. So somebody described me when I walked into a room before, because I was talking like this over the phone, and they said, wow, we expected somebody a lot younger to be walking through. So one of the catchphrases is that I'm the millennial trapped in a baby boomer body. And each morning the body feels it, but the mind wants to know all these things and keep up with everyone. So what I want to talk today about, though, what my business is Success Performance Solutions. If you look me up, that's what you're going to see. I write a lot about working with small to medium-sized companies. We help them recruit faster and hire smarter, which is a task because it's very difficult. And Robert just mentioned about having a fax machine. One of the problems that we run into today with small businesses and big businesses, but mostly small to medium-sized businesses, they still have that fax machine and it still works. Or they have a website and it still works. The problem is, I don't have my smartphone here, but everybody held up their smartphones before. Has anyone ever tried to apply for a job or fill out a government form on their smartphone? Is it easy? Here's what happens in today's market. They leave. The abandonment rate from the millennial generation and older people using smartphones, because I talk about not necessarily baby boomers and millennials, but I talk about the wired and the tired. So when we talk about that, is that the wired people, the people that you really want working for you, the people that we're talking about today that have the ability to help you disrupt and to keep up, is you lose them. The percentage of people who start an ad, that see an ad, want to apply for your business, and actually do it is less than 1%. Because the websites are cumbersome, they're not responsive, the applications are really pathetic. You can't download an application and expect someone who's going to scan it and print it back and mail it or fax it. If it can't be done quickly, it's not going to be there. So in my world, that's a lot of this disruption. So part of the problem in working with companies, all size companies, and organizations is that there's a real disconnect between how disrupted our environment is and how they're recruiting. But beyond that, and that's what we're here to talk about, I want to talk today a little bit about beyond that of what's the fix? How do we get more people that are skilled to be able to apply for those jobs? Because there's a lot of people that are applying that need a job, but they don't have the skill. Okay. So we're going to talk about this elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is disruptive technology. And we basically, people treat, as we're talking about Siri, we're talking about smartphones, we're talking about robots, we're talking about them like disruptive technology is a family pet that we're going to be cozy with, and it's cute, but it's not. It's going to change things rapidly. And nobody mentioned today quantum computing and how soon that's available or not. And most people don't understand it, and frankly, I don't understand it. All I know is that that is going to be exponential. If you think your computers are fast now, just wait. And when that happens, we're going to go on this accelerated curve of change. And we're just in a warm-up. So if you're uncomfortable now, it's going to be very painful later. And the companies and the businesses that are going to survive are going to be, nobody's going to be ready for it. But you're going to at least have a mindset that you're going to do a lot of chasing up. So this was from Ray Kurzweil. Mentioned that John just mentioned it a few minutes ago. Because of the explosive power of exponential growth, the 21st century will be the equivalent of 20,000 years of progress. We're going to see in the next few years, that's the equivalency. 20,000 years of progress. We're going to see in the next few years. Okay. I wanted to add, and I forgot that part, I wanted to just add that we're just not talking about infrastructure that's changing. Part of our infrastructure that needs a makeover is labor and people, and beyond just having people with the right skills. So, this is what the job line may look like in a few years. People will be applying for jobs. Some of them will be robots. Some of them will be human beings. That's essentially what our election just talked about bringing the jobs back because they've been outsourced. Well, it's beyond outsourcing. We're not sending them to China anymore because China doesn't want them because they're automating. The reality is the new jobs we're competing with are with robots. They're with Baxter and Siri and a host of other ones. So this is a short video, and this will basically, it's less than 2 minutes, if we can get it up and running. And again, similar to John's, we'll take care of that.
It's easy to be cynical of the endless and idiotic predictions of futures that never are. So that's why it's important to emphasize again that this stuff isn't science fiction. The robots are here right now. There is a terrifying amount of working automation in labs and warehouses around the world. We have been through economic revolutions before, but the robot revolution is different. Horses aren't unemployed now because they got lazy as a species, they're unemployable. There's little work that a horse can do to pay for its housing and hay. And many bright, perfectly capable humans will find themselves the new horse, unemployable through no fault of their own. But if you still think new jobs will save us, here is one final point to consider. The US Census in 1776 tracked only a few kinds of jobs: Now, there are hundreds of kinds of jobs, but the new ones are not a significant part of the labor force. Here's the list of jobs ranked by the number of people who perform them. It's a sobering list with the transportation industry at the top. Continuing downward, all of this work existed in some form 100 years ago, and almost all of them are easy targets for automation. Only when we get to number 33 on the list is there finally something new. Don't think that every barista or white-collar worker need lose their job before things are a problem. The unemployment rate during the Great Depression was 25%. The list above is 45% of the workforce. Just what we've talked about today, the stuff that already works, can push us over that number pretty soon. And given that even in our modern technological wonderland, new kinds of work aren't a significant portion of the economy, this is a big problem. This video isn't about how automation is bad, rather that automation is inevitable. It's a tool to produce abundance for little effort. We need to start thinking now about what to do when large sections of the population are unemployable through no fault of their own. What to do in a future where, for most jobs, humans need not apply.
For anybody that's, as I said, interested, it's a fascinating view, and I'll explain the one thing that was most powerful within that. I spoke to this gentleman the other day. He's an attorney in the Midwest, I believe. And basically he said, we are walking from the pages of science fiction into the workplace. And that essentially epitomized where we are. Also interesting enough, he started a new group. His practice group, it's the first in the country, is Robots, Artificial Intelligence, and Automation. To understand how this is going to affect the workplace. For instance, if minorities make up the majority of people doing lower skilled jobs, and that's a fact. What happens when all those jobs are eliminated? Is that adverse impact? Is that discrimination? These are some of the issues downstream that we need to be talking about because it's absolutely going to happen. Okay. I'm going to skip over that one. So here's one of the things that we've tried to do, and here's my focus. Here's the disruptor today. We've tried to hit the dartboard on job skills and training and workforce development and education basically by bending the dart. It's not going to work. So a couple reasons that job creation will fail. One is, we're based on an old different definition of work. We do not, most people, do not go to work anymore. And it's increasing very fast. There are people that go to office buildings and factories, but not the way they used to. A lot of people do it sometimes, and part of the days they can work from home. The more automation, you're going to be able to, right now you can do a surgery literally from around the world. That doctor doesn't go to work. He could do it anywhere he is and operate a robot to do a surgery. Almost every job will be run that way. We're also based on an assumption that change will be slow and incremental. And that's the biggest threat we have. It's moving fast as far as job creation, skill needs, workforce development, education, is that it's happening so fast that we think that we have time. As Dr. Kruk had mentioned, new program. Old MBA, I did a master's program a few years ago in leadership. Part of it was online, part of it was in class. It took me 5 years because of work, because I had some commitments. To understand that you can now do it in weeks, and even that will have to be accelerated in different ways. Okay. So we have to understand that this is going to happen much faster, and it's not linear, and it's not incremental. And ultimately, here's the big problem. And we have this as a society, and we're here, and we have to deal with this, not necessarily from thinking about disruptive technology, and I know this is the scary part. But because one robot will replace 30 employees or 50 employees or 100 employees in the supermarkets, and again, these are facts coming from the industry, one robot or one bot, which is the checkout, replaced 30 cashiers. You now have one human supervising 30 robots. As we accelerate this, and more companies are finding it more difficult to compete, they can't find the labor, the minimum wage goes up, and I'm not pro or con any of those, but these are all issues that are going to happen, and there's a lot of people who will be dispelled. So in that video, this is part of this scary stat. In the video, you can hear it a lot of other places, what I wanted to show you is out of the top 33 jobs that employ 45% of the population. So if you start with salespeople and retail people and clerks and go all the way down the line, you have to go down to the 33rd, which is computer programmers. The third, from 1 to 32, employs 45% of our population. The likelihood that those jobs will be eliminated within 10 years is 90%. We're talking about not worrying about how we're going to employ the 6 or 7 million people who are currently unemployed and the maybe 18 million people who are underemployed. What are we going to do when we have 65 more million people who are currently in low-skill administrative jobs that will be out of work? And that's not unemployed, unemployable. I wrote an article about 2 years ago in Huffington Post, and they basically stopped the comments because people don't want to hear that. You heard the rhetoric in the political race. People do not want to hear that. It's, I'm a hard worker and I've got good ethics, and I went to school and I'm $100,000 in debt. That's all true. And you know what? It was a lie. And part of it wasn't necessarily intentional, but things moved much faster than anybody expected. People thought that you can get after the job and that job would still be there when they graduated, and it's not. And this is what's really accelerating. So we need to think about, one of the questions we need to ask in summits and environments like this is, what does work look like? And how do we start retraining people not only for new jobs, but for a new lifestyle? What happens when what used to take us 40 hours to do, we could do in 20 hours? What do we do with the leisure time? Basically, and people, that's the fear. What do people do with their leisure time? You know, it'd be okay if they don't get in trouble, if they sit on their couch and play games, but what happens beyond that? And they're not going to be prepared for that aspect. So we need to start looking at how do we create work that robots can't do. We need to basically, again, workforce development, summits, schools, education, communities. We need to start asking the question, what are the things that at least in the next 30 to 40 years robots can't do? And we may not know for sure, because that 40 years can be 20 years. But at least that game. Right now, a lot of our skill programs, all the political rhetorics, this isn't party line, we're trying to bring jobs back. The jobs are gone, they're not coming back, and there's another 80 million that will be lost. That's where disruptive technology is going to change things. So this is the question, I found this yesterday in putting this together. We need to figure out how to make that leap. Because we got people on one side, and there is no bridge to get to the other side, other than flight. And it's not going to happen. So five things to think about. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly just to be sensitive to your time, and we'll make sure that you get the slides. But one is, we have assumptions and preconceived ideas about what work is. And I'm talking not only from government, the group of people here, entrepreneurs, but businesses, is what needs to be done. And we can't keep people in jobs that, because one of the reasons our economy is only growing at 1.5% or 2% is because we haven't improved productivity. Why? Because we've maxed out people. The people that are holding many of these jobs can't be more productive. They can't work faster, they can't work maybe a little smarter, they can't work harder, either because they don't have the skills or they're physically and mentally incapable of keeping up with what automation can do. But if you bring in the automation, all these people are out of work. So right now it's bad PR, it's bad politics, but it is the reality, because the only way that we're going to see 3 or 4% productivity gains, which means our country's growing and the wage go up and the quality of life goes up, is simply because we automated more. And then we have the problem, is what do we do with all the people? And we can't not do it, because then we don't have the productivity. Okay, we need a makeover in education, and Dr. Krug and what Bloomsburg are doing, and John with his new school, it's incredible stuff, and that's really where we need to think, but it needs to go beyond that. We need to prepare people for the work that needs to be done, not the jobs that exist today. Because the jobs that exist today, even the new jobs that we didn't think would be around 10 years ago, are going to be transformed in the next 5 to 10 years. We train people to do jobs. We need to train people to do work. I mentioned the massive job loss. That's coming very, very quickly. We got Dr. Robot. John, everybody's mentioned the robots. That's coming very fast. It's not only coming, though, for the low-skilled administrative workers. The first lawyer robot was just employed, and he's doing bankruptcy law. Next is unemployment law, because it's not possible for the same thing. Anybody see the 60 Minutes a few weeks ago with Watson on TV? If you're not, Google it and look up YouTube Watson 60 Minutes. And it showed that the cancer centers are using Watson, that's why it's Dr. Robot, are using Watson for diagnosis. Why? Because it can review 8,000 research papers a day. Doctors can't keep up with that. A whole team of doctors can't keep up with that. So when they go in, they're reviewing the latest research through AI and then making the decisions, what's the best path of treatment. That's happening with attorneys. It's already happened with accountants. Sports writers, most of the sports you read, anybody do fantasy football? I'm a big fan. All the sports that you read that comes out real quick is done by robots. There's no writer sitting there doing it. And we got to take the foot off the brake. A couple speakers said that this morning, and I'm going to reiterate it. I started that way. People think that the government, not that it's bad, but the government and regulations and competition are going to stop disruptive technology. And if it stops it, we're in big doo-doo. Because someone else around the world is going to pick it up. The competition will go somewhere else. We have regulations that just don't make sense. A 40-hour work week doesn't make sense. To differentiate between part-time and full-time doesn't make sense. It started in our concept of work, by the way, is based on scarcity. Why does everybody work?
We just need to get stuff, and there's not enough stuff for everyone to just have
Stuff, pay our bills. That concept is only 150 years old, maybe 160. Because before that, you were either a slave, you either hired people to get it done, you paid people room and board and shelter and food, but there was no chance to improve your quality of life like we have over the last 2 centuries. So part of the process, and I know John's a big fan of Singularity University and Ray Kurzweil and a lot of the work they're doing, they're talking about abundance. It's what happens when we don't have to pay energy because solar costs are free. We don't have to pay education because you can go online and get at least the minimum education through schools like Khan Academy and University of the People. That you can get a good education doing that, and then if you want an advanced degree, you can go to Bloom. So if you don't have education, you don't have energy costs, you don't have transportation costs, you don't have to work as hard. And that's ultimately the movement, but our regulations our government regulations and our mindsets don't comprehend that. And we have to. That's why I was really excited to be here, because we can talk about better broadband, better education systems, faster technology. What do we do with the people? Two things. We need people that can help build and maintain the robots until they can figure out how to do it themselves, which they will, and then we'll have to go to a higher level. And then what do we do with the literally 100 million people who will be unemployable? Final comment, Isaac Asimov. This was mentioned a few years ago. It is change, continuing change, inevitable change, that is the dominant factor in society. No sensible decision can be made any longer without taking into account not only the world as it is, but the world as it will be. This in turn means that our statesmen, our businessmen, and every man must take on a science-fictional way of thinking. That's what accelerate is. That's what exponential change is. You've been warned. Exponential change will accelerate change. Thank you. I appreciate